and good Sunday evening to all of you. So, today I am going to continue the discussion I started a couple of videos ago, having to do with the download that I've been receiving from the ancestors about what we now know of as the Reptilian Agenda, the Nagas, and their influence on the human race. And I'm here to tell you that even within the information that you've been receiving about the reptilians and about the Reptilian Agenda, that in and of itself is part of the lie. You know, one of the best ways to keep people confused when there is evidence that that somebody is stealing, or for instance, let's just make it really simple. Let's say you're working in a workplace and somebody's stealing out of the cash register. Though one of the ways that the person who's doing the stealing can cover their tracks is to create suspicion about other people. And no matter what evidence comes to light that it is in fact them, they turn it around and put it back on others, like, oh, well, see, that's because so-and-so has been lying about me and planting false evidence about me to show that I've been stealing. And they're very good at it, to the point where even though you know somebody's stealing, you can see it happening right in front of you. The person who's doing the stealing, whenever the evidence comes towards them, they just simply turn it around on others. And so that's a very simplistic way of explaining what has been happening since the dawn of time with the Reptilian Agenda. So I'm going to be sharing with you this download that I've been receiving from the universe, and understand that the way that we view information now is not the same as our ancestors did thousands of years ago. Ever since the introduction of the reptilian religion of monotheism. Monotheism is a dualist, literalist religion. And the whole point of that religion was to destroy the old way of doing things. And Europe is a perfect example, because it wasn't exemplified any more than it was in Europe, because that's exactly what happened. They came in, the imperial monotheists started as the Catholics, and then now it's pretty much any monotheist religion is doing this. But they came in, and with a very fierce opposition towards any indigenous shamanic tradition. They would not only destroy it, but they would, again, imagine if you're coming in, if you're an evil person coming in to sow evil things, the way to do it is to start saying that everybody else is evil, everybody else that's not you. And this is what they did. So in Europe, you have places that have the name devil attached to it. And it's almost guaranteed that any one of those places, Devil's Hill or Devil's whatever, was at one point a sacred site for the indigenous polytheist people of Europe. So this is what's been going on ever since the introduction of this religion, is to tear us away from the earth. Number one, this is extremely important. Tear us away from the earth, tear us away from earth, nature, religions, and make everything to be seen in a dualist perspective. Dualist means two. It's either this or that, good or bad, right or wrong. There's no in between. This is the dualist mindset. So keep your eyes out for people who talk like this, especially people who get really emotionally charged with their dualist agenda. If you try to engage somebody in a rational conversation about, okay, well, let's look at the facts, a dualist will jump into making everything out to be either right or wrong or good or bad. And the way you know that somebody is guilty is if when the evidence starts pointing towards them, their initial reaction is to say, that's a lie. Everything that that person is telling you is a lie. And if they say it enough, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's not true, that's a lie, it gets into people's minds. It breaks down people's defenses and their inability to see things objectively. And so they're like dogs. You know, all you have to do is just say, oh, you mean the lie, that person, the liar? You lose any objectivity over that person, and you immediately start to see, oh yeah, everything, that's a lie. So the person who's doing the lying is the person who spends all the time talking about everything's a lie. This is, goes back again very long into our history. So before I get too wrapped up in a tangent here, let me tell you what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about from the beginning of time, there has been a conspiracy and an agenda to prevent human beings from achieving their highest destiny, from achieving their true evolution, which is the masters of the universe. I said earlier that one of the main focuses of the Christian religion was to demonize, literally, demonize the earth. And so anything that had to do with the earth was seen as evil. And you see this all through the New Testament, especially where they call it the natural man. You know, the natural man means somebody who's attached to the natural world. But then it becomes somebody who's attached to their natural instincts, to their natural feelings. And so it creates an environment of shame for simply having a human experience, so that you begin to doubt being a human. And as you know, especially in the Middle Ages, but long into now, the Christian religion makes people feel guilty and horrible just for being human. In fact, all you have to do is just go to any church, turn on any Christian broadcast, and you'll be hearing them talk about how sinful people are, and even though we're sinful and we have to repent, there's just all this focus on being a human being is a sinful thing, and that being an earthly human being or being of the flesh or being of the world, these are all other ways of saying being connected to practical reality, being connected to the laws of earth and time and space. And it is designed to trap you into your intellect. So your intellect is not your mind. So I'm going to be talking to you about the race of beings known as the Nagas, who are the race of beings that first created in life on Earth, which we have as human beings, the reptilian brain. The base of our brain is reptilian. Now, as it turns out, our brain has evolved, and we've evolved other things that we would also call mind. So remember, if you're not new to my channel, then I make a big distinction between the intellect and the mind. The Naga agenda, the reptilian agenda, is to isolate you and treat you like an animal. Like an animal before the slaughter, what they do is they corral them and they push them down. Even when you're out in, on the mountainside, you have to corral the animals. You use animals to corral them, then you get them into an actual corral, and then you start to drive them into the barn and down these little passageways until the guy with the bolt takes them out. The Naga agenda is to corral you into your intellect. The intellect is the part of your brain that makes decisions based on dualist perspective. This is good, that is bad. This is up, this is down, this is here, that is there. This is what's happening when those who are choosing to sow dissension and choosing to cause strife, choosing to lie to you and steal from you, or to steal from a group of people. This is what they do. They start to create fear from extremes, dualist extremes. It's either this or that. And if you're not this, then you're that. This comes from the Bible. If you go back to the early books of the Bible, Jehovah says very clearly to Moses, in his, there's a bunch of different, communications between Moses and did I say Noah? Moses and Jehovah. I don't know if I said that right. And Jehovah makes it very clear that there's only one path, and that is to follow every single law of Jehovah. And if you don't follow every single law of Jehovah, then you hate him. If you love him, then you follow every single commandment to the letter. And if you only follow 99% of the commandments, but you don't follow 100% of the commandments, then you hate Jehovah. There's no middle ground. You can't like him. You can't love him a lot. You can't be trying. You are either perfect or imperfect. This is the Naga agenda, to drive you into the intellect so that you only see things from those black and white perspective. Your mind is something altogether different. Your mind is the part of you that sees things objectively. Your mind is the part of you that allows you empathy to, even when you're talking with somebody who has a different opinion than yours, you have the ability to say, I can understand why you would say that. Or, you make a good point about that. I hadn't thought about that. Or if you're in a relationship and there's an emotional conflict, the mind is the part of you that gives you the ability to say to the other person, I understand that why you feel that way, and I certainly, it was not my intention to bring that upon you, and I'm so sorry you're in so much pain. Having said that, I don't want to have kids. I know that you don't want to have kids. This is the kind of conversation I have in my 30s. I know that you want to have kids, and I totally get it, and I feel for you, and I want you to, I don't want them. So you find the common ground, you own your own side of things, and you allow people to have their other side. You have compassion for people. You have compassion for people who are your enemies. You have the ability to differentiate different degrees. Even if somebody is on the other team, whatever that is, you have the ability to see the difference between those who are kind and those who are nice, and understand, the other people's plight. And then you can see the extreme, the people on the extreme. And yeah, those are the people we need to be aware of, because there's just no talking to them. But, everybody else, they're humans like me. This is the mind. When it comes to your own problems, the mind has the ability to rise above all of the minutia and look at things objectively. A really good phrase to understand how the mind works is to say, pick your battles. If you're in a relationship long enough, especially, I don't know what it's like for women in heterosexual relationships, but for men, at some point you have to learn how to say, yes, dear. You learn how to say, I understand, yes, dear, even if, what she's saying in your experience just is not making sense. You have to learn to be able to pick your battles. When is it important to say, no, the toilet paper has to go on this way with the flap hanging down? Otherwise, sometimes you have to go, yes, dear, I will turn however you need me to do it. I remember when I was married, my ex-wife, I still, to this day, it just makes me, I don't get it. Anyway, she had this thing. We had, we had a big house, and we had numerous bathrooms. How many did we have? We had I think we had 4 bathrooms in this house. It was huge. And so we had a guest bathroom downstairs. Now, the guest bathroom was right next to my studio where I used to teach. And so students would go in and use that guest bathroom. But if I went in there, and my ex-wife would go in there and she would put like the hand towels in a certain way with this folded like that and this folded over like this, and it was, and I'd walk in to, wash my hands and use the towel, and she'd say, you can't use those. I'd say, what are you talking about? Those are the hand towels. No, you can't use those. And I said, let me see if I understand this. You have towels hanging on the rack that are, for all intents and purposes, look exactly like hand towels that people use to, no, you can't. And she just would blow up. She hadn't just, I was not allowed to use the hand towels in the bathroom. I guess there was one rack with a towel, and I had to use that one, but I couldn't use anything. Other things like when she would make the bed, which still I kind of don't understand that. You know, you're going to sleep in it again in a few hours. And she would make the bed, and then she would take this thing. It wasn't like a bedspread. It was just, it looked sort of like a big giant table napkin, and she would sort of throw it on the edge of the bed and pull it like it was, you know, like it was, you know, I'm like, what is that? You know, why is it on crooked like that? And I couldn't touch that. I had to let her make the bed. And even though I was the only one besides her that was ever going to see the bed, that's the way things had to be. Well, you have to learn to pick your battles, so I didn't fight that. Those, you know, that's not a battle worth fighting over. This is the mind. The mind has the ability to do that. The intellect doesn't. The intellect is things are only good or bad or right or wrong or evil or righteous. Those are the only two choices that you have. You either are going to go to heaven and be in bliss forever and God loves you, or you're going to burn in eternal torment because you got God's name wrong at the end of the world. That's the intellect. This is what the Naga conspiracy is all about. So let me tell you a story. I'm still getting downloads from this, and it's turning into a very large file within me, which I believe I'm going to turn into probably a series of books, having to teach everybody what this is about. So I talked last time, if you haven't watched, go back and watch the video about how the Earth is the nexus point. I think it was 2 videos ago. And I talked a lot about the Manu. The Manu are the race of beings from whom human beings are descended. And the Manu were the rulers of the universe. And they had achieved through their meditative powers, they had achieved a transcendence. And they could master time and space. And they could influence with their mind other people's minds. They could connect with other people's minds. Now, listen to the words that I'm using. I'm using the word mind. I'm not using the word intellect. Intellect is something else. So there was another race of beings at the beginning of time, and these were the Nagas. And the Nagas were extremely evolved beings as well, but they did not have the expansive connection that the Manu had. And they looked to the Manu. On the one hand, they admired the Manu, and on the other hand, they feared and resented the Manu because they knew the Manu had powers that they couldn't comprehend. Now, the Manu wanted to have a place that they could go in order to empower themselves and to learn. And so they found a point in the universe which they called the nexus point. The nexus point is all of the other 9 dimensions of reality. This is where they all came together. This was a place in the universe where all of the 9 dimensions were interspersed, interconnected. And so it was a place of intense power. And so the Manu would go to this place. In fact, they created a fortress that they could go and spend time so that they could handle the intensity of all of the 8 worlds that were coming in on them, and the intensity and the power of it. And they gave consciousness to this nexus point. This nexus point eventually became where we are now, which is Earth. Now, the Manu would go to this place, and they would, whenever they would come to Earth and be filled with the power of all of the 9 realms, and they would seek to increase their spiritual understanding and their spiritual powers and their powers of transcendence. They had the belief that the rest of the universe, the other beings in the universe, would not be able to handle this. So this is why they created it as a fortress, so that the rest of the universe, the beings of the universe, couldn't just come and maybe perhaps learn and gain power to the extent that the Manu had. Now, the Nagas, on the other hand, were students of the Manu. And the Nagas, they did not have the same power of expansive mind. They had incredible powers when it came to the intellect. They were incredibly smart, very crafty, and they could build things. So they were extremely good at building devices and technologies. And they would invent all kinds of technologies to mimic what the Manu could do without technology. So they would have this ability to create apparatus and devices that would allow them to do things that mimicked and looked like what the Manu could do simply with the power of their mind. So this is, again, the difference between intellect and mind. The mind has the expansive power. It's a spiritual essence. The intellect is not. The intellect is focused on the material reality. So the Nagas were very materially connected. Now the Manu didn't have a problem with this because they saw that there was material aspect in the universe, and then there was non-material, and there was everything in between, and nothing was right or wrong or good or bad. It was just a part of that. And so on the one hand, they feared the Nagas because the Nagas were getting extremely crafty with their ability to create with technology. And they saw that this technology could be destructive to the actual fabric of the universe if misused. So there was this discussion among the hierarchy of the Manu whether or not to allow the Nagas to go to Earth and learn the powers of the mind. So after long debate and discussion, they decided that they would allow a few Nagas to become apprentices. And they brought them to Earth with them whenever they would make their sojourns there to do their mind experiments. And they did that so that the Nagas could experience the power of being at the nexus point of the universe where all of the other universes were, the energy of all the other universes were coming together. And they did it to test them, number one, to see if they could handle it, and number two, to see if the intensity of the experience of the nexus point would force them to move into the power of the mind so that they could get out of their obsession with dualism and the intellect and the physical realms. And what ended up happening was that the Nagas who came and studied there did begin to expand in their abilities. And it looked as though they were going to be able to tap into the powers of the mind. But what ended up happening is that it was sort of like, when you see a bodybuilder who's just really, way out of proportion. Like some of these modern bodybuilders are just, I mean, they get sick. They die of, like heart attacks and kidney failure because their organs, these people are taking growth hormones, which are making their bones and their organs grow, not just their muscles. And so their bodies are getting warped and they end up, dying of all kinds of ridiculous nonsense, even though they have 10 years of being crazy huge and, outrageous. But this is kind of what was happening with the Nagas. The Nagas, their intellect started growing in such a huge way beyond their ability to understand what they were doing with their intellect. And so unlike the Manu, who have this ability to connect to minds, connect with other minds, and to communicate on the level of the mind, which is the spirit. The Nagas started being able to influence and manipulate other people through the intellectual realm. So they had this ability to hypnotize people. They had this ability to what we would now have psychic abilities. The ability to tell what somebody's thinking. Not what they're feeling, but what they're thinking. To be able to create illusions so that beings could have this illusion that something is happening that isn't really happening, because they would go in and mess with the intellect. So understand how the intellect works. The intellect is the interface between the soul and the physical world. That is the only purpose of the intellect, to help you understand. All of this information is coming through your eyeballs or through your skin or through your ears into your body. And if we didn't have the intellect to sort out, this is that, I don't need that, take this, that's light, that's good, that's color, that's whatever, and filter out what we needed, we wouldn't be able to create a picture. You wouldn't be able to navigate through the world. You wouldn't be able to get up and walk, because you wouldn't be able to know the difference between up and down and right and left and hot and cold. You'd be a mess on the physical plane. And this is what the Nagas became very proficient at. And they not only became proficient at it, they became so good at it that they had the ability to influence, manipulate, and hypnotize the weak or the weaker-minded Manu. And this became such a huge scandal that the Manu shut down the program and said, that's it, no more Nagas are coming to Earth to learn. And so they created an even firmer fortress out of it. And only select beings, and in this case only the Manu, and it was very regulated, because of their ability to, now that these few Nagas who had been on this nexus point had learned this power, had the ability to transform themselves to appear as Manu, and so they could sneak past the guards and get to the nexus point, which would be like steroids for them, and their intellect will get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So this is one of the issues. Now, I won't get into, there's a bunch of other stuff that happened which I don't have time to talk about, but suffice it to say, what ended up happening is that the Manu lost their supremacy over the universe, and they could no longer defend the nexus point from other beings. And so, because they could no longer defend it, the Nagas who had been waiting and watching, waiting for the Manu to lose their supremacy, the moment that they had the opportunity, they went to the nexus point and they took it over. And they sought to control and make it a dominion for only the Nagas. And this is your reptilian brainstem. You have your reptilian brainstem as a result of that, because the Nagas created life as we know it in the physical. And they didn't do it by themselves. That's a whole other story. But for the sake of what we're going to talk about today, they created what is known as the reptilian brain. And so the way that you know that you are being manipulated by the Nagas is when you are in your reptilian brain. How do you know when you're in your reptilian brain? First and foremost, the main tool of the Naga agenda is fear. And what does fear do? Fear puts you into a dualist state. It's either good or bad. It's right or wrong. Fight or flight. There's no middle ground. So I'm sitting here telling you all of this to help you understand that any information that you get from anywhere, whether it be from another human being or from the music that you listen to or from the media, if the information that you're getting is that you are being stimulated to be put into fear, and you can't get any information that gives you a gradation of truth. If the only information you're getting is it's either right or it's wrong, or if you find somebody who is, let's say somebody who has been known to lie, if you find that person who is most likely who has been known to lie, if that person is spending a lot of time saying other people are lying, that is a Naga operative. I gave you the example before. You got a group of people at work, somebody's stealing out of the tin. The guy who's stealing out of the tin, the way he avoids getting caught is he starts blaming everybody else. And when there is evidence that points to him, he says, I'm being set up by that guy. He's the one that's been stealing it. He's setting me up. And if he's a true Naga, he'll do it so well that people will buy into it. So, what does all this have to do? Why is this important? That's really just kind of the background for what I'm about to tell you now. The reason that the Manu had the ability to rule the universe was because they operated from their minds, not their intellect. The mind trusts. The mind surrenders. And if you've ever done any kind of energy work, and you know, trust me, I have. When you are able to get the power to manipulate life force energy. Sorry, I'm gonna let me turn that off. Okay. When you get the ability to manipulate life force energy, the way to do that is by surrendering. It is this strange paradox where when you surrender to the universe, when you surrender to life force energy, it obeys you. But at the same time, you can't control it. So the word obey is in quotes. And so then the question is, who is controlling whom? If you are using your energy to heal, if you are using energy to change the laws of the universe, the question is, are you the one that's doing it, or are you surrendering to the life force energy that's doing it through you? This is something that the Nagas can't understand because they are all about control. Whenever you're dealing with control, wanting to control the universe, control people, what you're really operating from is the fear of death. Death is the one thing that we cannot control. And we spend all this time in fear. Whenever you're in fear, if you're in fear of the government, if you're in fear of the Nagas themselves, if you're in fear of God's wrath, if you're in fear of losing your loved one, if you're in fear of money, not having enough money, this is really the fear of death. And it's a wasted fear because you can't avoid it. You know, I just came from swimming a little while ago in the ocean. I live near the ocean. When I can, I like to go and take an afternoon swim and do some body surfing or surfing or whatever. But today I went out body surfing. There's a homeless guy on the beach. And he's been there for a long time. You know, and I don't know how he survives. But, you know, it made me think about how much time and effort people fear death, they fear poverty, right? And what is that feeling? If we didn't have our cars and we didn't have our houses and we didn't have our money and we didn't have our jobs, we would be homeless, which feels like death. That guy just keeps living. That guy won't die. I mean, I don't know how he stays alive. And then there are people that have everything, and then they get sick and they die. Death is something you can't control, and you can't avoid it. So being afraid of something you can't control and can't avoid is a real waste of energy. So whenever you're in fear of anything, what you're really afraid of is death. And death is the ultimate surrender. It's the complete lack of control. You have no control. At least that's our fear of it. And so this is why Odin, Woden, he who is consumed with the fire of self-awareness. This is why Odin died to himself. He sacrificed himself to himself. And this is why Jesus is the opposite of that, the God of fear, because he died for you so that you would not be sent to eternal torment. Fear. Odin says you're going to die anyway. You might as well die to yourself now. Sacrifice yourself to yourself. So that surrender to the infinity within is what brought Odin to become king of the gods. So I'm trying to get to this last point. I'm setting you up to understand what the main thing I teach here is, which is when you were incarnated, you programmed in your soul a desire that would bring you to your highest awareness. You chose to come to this nexus point called Earth, which is the nexus point of all of the 9 worlds. It is a place of intense power. That is why it is so challenging here. The power here is so intense that if you try to fight anything, if you try to control anything, everything starts to fall apart. You get angry, you get lonely, you get miserable, you get sick, you get poor, you become violent, you become fearful. This is what happens when you try and control this intensity of this nexus point we call Earth. If you stop worrying about absolutely everything except for the one thing that matters, which is what you've programmed yourself to do, then the universe and these 9 worlds line up to give you everything that you need to achieve that. I've been calling it your soul desire. If you follow your soul desire, you will be challenged to come from a place of fearlessness so that you can experience, like Odin, dying to yourself, which means completely giving up all control over everything and focusing on only one thing, which is that desire within you and going after to accomplish that. When you do that, you become bulletproof. You become bulletproof to the Naga conspiracy. The Naga conspiracy and the prime agenda of the Naga conspiracy is to put you in fear, which is why we have our reptilian brainstem. It's where all of your fear comes from. If I told you how many people are operating from their reptilian brainstem, you wouldn't believe me. Because remember, just because somebody's operating from the reptilian brainstem doesn't mean they're stupid. The reptilians are very smart, they're incredibly crafty. They have the most powerful intellects on the planet. In the universe. They have the most powerful intellects in the universe. But they do not have mind. And so when you are trapped in your intellect, you cannot have the objectivity of the mind. You cannot have the ability to be everywhere at once, which is what the mind has. The mind has the ability through itself to connect to everything and everyone. Through the mind you have true compassion, you have true understanding. Through the Nagas you can have psychic power, but that's only intellect controlling intellect and deceiving it. One of the biggest lies of the intellect is that it will give you experiences that you think are spiritual, but they're not. There's a lot of people running around having had visions, having had all kinds of experiences that they think are spiritual, and they're not. They're just other forms of the lower self, the unconscious, the subconscious, and the intellect. So, I tried to get it all in there, and again, this is only just one slice of what's being downloaded into me, and again, I think there's going to be a whole series of books about this, but take it for what it is. You can take it as a transmission from the ancestors. You can take it as a modern mythology. You can take it as pure fiction. You can take it as a teaching tool. I don't care how you look at it. But if you study it and let it penetrate within you, and you let it change and influence your thinking, your assumptions, it will completely revolutionize your life, and it will give you an ability to seamlessly manifest your deepest desires and give you the greatest fulfillment. But it will be challenging because you will have to sacrifice yourself to yourself. Unlike the lie of the Naga Christian religion that says, don't worry, Jesus will do it for you. The religion that says that God hates you and wants to destroy you, and just simply by your presence you deserve to be destroyed eternally without mercy. And Jesus, looking down on you and with false humility and false love, says, I'll do it for you, you stupid, pathetic humans. I'll die for you. And then you stay in fear forever. That is what belief in Jesus will do for you. It'll give you a false sense of love, a false sense of compassion, when in reality you are the masters of the universe. And you have been deceived by your own intellect and by your own reptilian brainstem to think that you are limited. And the last, and I'll shut up with this and then we'll open it up for questions. The biggest lie, I don't know which one is bigger. I don't know if biggest is the right word. One of the most powerful and definitely one of the, the focuses of the lie is that this earth is a hell that you must endure or escape from. As long as you believe that, you are trapped in your intellect and you are being controlled. There's a reason why we say in the grip of fear. Because what do snakes do? What do boa constrictors do? When they're killing their prey, they wrap themselves around their prey and they squeeze. And unlike normal muscles like we have to squeeze and let go, squeeze and let go. They just squeeze and they just hold and they don't work themselves too hard. They're just squeezing, and whatever the animal is, it's trying to push it away, and it has to relax and it has to exhale and then squeezes a little tighter. And then it waits as you're struggling and struggling and you have to relax and exhale, squeezes a little tighter. Squeezes. And so not only does it crush you, but it prevents you from being able to breathe. You suffocate because you are in the grip of this snake. And fighting the snake is what makes you die faster. So when you struggle with your fears and you act on them, and you go to defend yourself, you go to buy arsenals of guns. I have a friend of mine who's got an arsenal of guns. He's absolutely convinced. He was convinced of this, 12 years ago or whenever it was when Obama became president. He said, Obama's going to take away my guns, and I know, and he was prepared 8 years ago to have this shootout with the government because they were going to come and take away his guns. Of course, that never happened. Same kind of thing. You need to go get all of these guns and protect yourself from all the you're trapped in that, and then it's squeezing, squeezing, squeezing. All right, now I'm starting to babble. I'm going to take a break here, and then we'll come back and we'll see if there are any questions. So let's see, where am I? Right here. All right, so let us take a look and see what's happening with the questions. By the way, if you're new to the channel, if you're on the live Q&A, the best way to interact with me is to leave me a question. I will respond, and I will not read any statements or anything like that. But if you have a question, I'll answer it. And the way that you let me know you're asking a question is you write question, and then you write down your question. Otherwise, I'll think you're just one of the many people who are just dumping their opinion, and I'm going to scroll past you. So unfortunately, I do miss a lot of questions because of that. So the way to make sure that I see it is to write question, and then I'll be able to answer. All right, so let's take a look and see what's happening here with the question, Jedi Black Knight question. Is it really appropriate to use the term Nagas, given that there are also many Nagas that are benevolent and want to help humans? Yes, it is, because as you continue to follow this download that I'm getting, you're going to find out that there are, in fact, many benevolent Nagas. I'm not a racist. And that they actually are working to help human beings achieve their supremacy in the universe. So it is appropriate. But we need to start from a vantage point, and so this is where we're starting from. And so there we go. All right. And again, bear in mind what this is, what it is that I'm doing. So don't be such a Naga that you get wrapped up in the intellectual this, that, right or wrong, up and down. See things in broader perspective. But I understand your question, and it's a good question. Emerson's Coffee Bite question. For those of us returning to our ancient European ways, what are the best ways to combat the Naga attacks on our efforts? Can Nagas possess people like demons? Well, let's see here. Multiple questions there. Best way to combat Naga attacks is very simple. This is the whole point. The whole point of everything that I'm telling you, this whole mythological setup, the story, is to help you understand that there's only one thing you need to worry about. And that is to follow your deepest soul desire. How do you know what your soul desire is? It's the one thing that when you're fantasizing, when you are giving yourself permission to completely fantasize about what gives you the greatest happiness, whatever comes to your mind, that is your soul desire. And the whole point of being here is to learn the lesson that fear, guilt, false responsibility, ego, all of that is a temptation to keep you from doing that childlike thing which says, this is what really makes me happy, and that's what I'm going to put my effort into doing. When you do that, you are operating from your soul. The mind is fueled by the power of the soul. The mind is the reflection of the soul. The intellect, again, is just the interface between the human spirit and the physical world. It's only here to give us that information. So when I talk about that the Nagas were very good at creating technology, there's nothing wrong with technology as long as its focus is to help you physically interact with this three-dimensional world. But when it's used to take the place of the mind and people use it as an escape, then they end up getting trapped in their intellect. Anyway, I'm going off the subject here. There's only one thing you need to do. It's always the same. My answer is the same to everything, which is follow your deepest joy and go after it, and no matter how scared you are, you do it. That makes you bulletproof. Makes you bulletproof from any Naga attacks. Any attacks of your reptilian brainstem. Can Nagas possess people like demons? Well, again, there's an assumption there. The assumption is that you are in danger of being possessed, either by demons or Nagas or whatever. Possession only happens, again, if you go on, for those who are new, go and watch my videos about possession. Possession only happens to people who are seeking to be diverted from their emotional pain. And I'm not minimizing it. There are people who have gone through horrendous tragedy, physical, mental, sexual abuse, unbelievable amounts of trauma and tragedy. And this creates a schism in the mind, which is, how we end up people who have multiple personalities. It's a way to fragment the mind so that you're not overwhelmed with the horrors and the pain of what's happened. So that happens on multiple levels. And people, when they're running away from their emotional pain or their fear, then what they are doing is they seek to be taken out of their pain. And so this is what a demon does. A demon is an entity, an energetic consciousness that is divorced from itself. And because it's divorced from itself, it's out of integrity with its own soul desire, if you will. It is running out of energy. And so what it does is it feeds off of the negative emotions of human beings. And so that's why ghosts scare you, and why demons spend all this time trying to scare you, is that when you're in a state of fear, they can feed off of that and use that as the closest they can get to actual spiritual power. So what ends up happening is that the human being who is trying to avoid their deepest pain sends out an unconscious invitation. Like have you ever found yourself saying, I just want to not feel this, just get me out of this, I'll do anything not to feel this. Well, when this happens on a very, very deep level, on an unconscious level, it sends out a vibration out to the universe, and like any predator, they can smell it like blood. And then they come, and then what ends up happening is that there's an unconscious exchange and agreement that is made. It's a contract. And the person who is trying to avoid their pain says to the demon, unconsciously of course, says, I need you to distract me from my pain. And the demon says, great, how about if I scare you and frighten you and give you all kinds of horrible nightmares and throw things around and all this other stuff and maybe make you sick. And then the person says, great, as long as that gets me out of my personal pain, go for it. And then a contract is made. Once the individual, and I know this from experience because I used to be an exorcist, and this is how I learned that this is what happens, that once the individual acknowledges the pain and forgives their abuser, the negative entity has to leave. Whenever I did exorcisms, I was a Christian then, I could use the name of Jesus, blah, 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 and it would sort of keep things, kind of under wraps, temporarily. But if the person did not forgive, did not name who it was that harmed them and forgive them, because once you forgive somebody, then you get to have your own feelings about it. Once they did that, then I was able to get rid of the demon. But then I would have to say to them afterwards, listen, you got to go to a therapist and get some counseling, and you got to go to your, as a Christian, then you got to go to your pastor and blah, 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 and you got to stop, taking drugs and whatever they were doing. You've got to deal with your life, otherwise it'll come back. And sure enough, if they didn't follow my directions, it would come back. Because they needed it. It's just like people who are in abusive relationships. I remember once as a kid, I was 10 years old, and we saw this. I was with some older kids. No, I wasn't 10. What am I saying? I think I was like maybe 14 or 15. Sorry about that. I was like 14 or 15. And I was with like some kids that were like 16, 17. We were driving around, and we saw this car like drive up to the edge of this cliff, and this woman comes flying and tumbling out of the car, onto the side of the road, and then the car takes off. And she's like on the side of the road, and she's crying, and we get out, and we're like, what is it? What's going on? And she was totally in shock, and we found out that there was some guy that was abusing her, and sure enough, he came back. And I was furious, but I was only like 14 years old. I was a little kid. And I'm like looking at him, I'm all furious, and the guy got all in my face, and but somebody came along and got in his face, and told the woman, listen, come with us. You're safe. Come with us. We'll take you to the police and, you'll be okay. She got back in the car with the guy. There was no reason for her to do that except, why? She was more addicted to the drama and the chaos of being physically abused than whatever else was going on in her life that she was afraid to look at. And I know that's a general statement, but it's still true. You go deep enough, it's still true. This is what happens when people become possessed. It's the same thing. So there are no victims. To get back to your question, how can we keep ourselves from being possessed? You don't have to. Go after what makes you happy. Deal with the fear and the pain that comes up. Own it. And continue to take fearless action towards what you want, and nothing can touch you. The universe has to give you everything that you need, including protection. This is why I tell people to never get worried or bent out of shape over all the political stuff and all the stuff that's going on over the world. If you follow that rule, you can always find a way to where you belong. There was a guy that I've known since college who got out of Syria. He was targeted by the government of Syria way back when, and so he made his way out, and he walked across the desert and got into Arabia, and through Arabia got there, and eventually got here. And he's now very successful. And that, just shows you that no matter who you are or where you are, you will be given the strength and the power to do whatever it is you need to do to accomplish your soul desire. Evan Price, question. Do you believe Moses' cane that turned into a snake has relation to the reptilian brain? I have such a problem with any of the Abrahamic tradition that I don't even want to give it any credence whatsoever. I just don't have an open enough mind about it. I think it's such a toxic belief system that I don't even want to look at it. Because, it's not like normal mythology. I mean, first of all, the whole story of Moses, by the way, is completely made up, and it is presented as historical fact. It has always been presented as historical fact. So much so that still a huge amount of the population of the world believes that the Hebrews came out of bondage out of Egypt. It never happened. The Hebrews are the descendants of the, what are they called? The Canaanites. The Canaanites are the ancestors to the Hebrews, who are the ancestors to the Jews. The Jews are nothing more than Canaanites. That whole myth about the children of Israel coming out of Egypt and making their way across the desert to their homeland is a false narrative that was designed to that was designed by the Jewish elite to wipe away the history of the Canaanites, including their polytheist history, which is exactly what happened when the first people who came to the Americas, these were, many of them were religious zealots, and they brought with them this thing about this land was their New Jerusalem. That is what fueled their prejudice against Native Americans, because they treated the Native Americans like the Canaanites, and that they were the children of Israel coming to wipe out the Canaanites. It's just such a toxic, the whole thing is so toxic, I can't give any credence to it whatsoever. I mean, I say take that whole Abrahamic mythology and throw it in the trash. I'm not into book burning, but if there was one book I would burn, it would be that one. It's caused the most destruction in the history of the world, in my personal belief. All right. So just there's a common Nephil. Just be aware that when when you curse, when you use foul language in your questions or your text, it gets put into spam, and it doesn't end up on here. So you have to talk without cursing. Also, if you put any links to other websites, it won't show up. Just letting you know, in case you want me to see your question. So Common Nephil, if you want me to answer your question, you have to write question so I can see it. Is there a difference between fear and common sense, he asks. Of course there is. Why would you ask that question? That's an obvious question. Of course there is. There are 3 natural fears. We only have 3 natural fears. Infants have the fear of loud noises, of sudden movement, and of heights. They don't have any fear of anything else. Any other fear you have is learned. So unless something is flying at your head, making a loud noise, and threatening to push you off a cliff, you have no fear in the moment that you need to be worried about. Worried about things that aren't in the immediate realm. Like, I was out swimming out there and body surfing, and the waves are starting to pick up, and I started feeling a little fear. Ooh, that's a big wave. That might help. That's a common sense fear. But I'm not worried about the ocean doing that to me now. I'm not in the ocean anymore. So if you're sitting there in the comfort of your home worried about something, whatever that fear is an unnatural, irrational fear. And that is not common sense. So when people ask me that question, and I don't know you, but when people ask me that question, my first reaction is that this is somebody that is proud of their fears, that likes their fears, and wants me to back up. Yes, you should be afraid of the government. You should be afraid of this. You should be afraid of those people and that, and this race of people and that religion. And then you can hold on to your fear, your irrational fear. But that's not common sense. So yes, of course there's a difference. Genunga Greg, question. Hello teacher, can a Manu be an ascended master? Yes, the ascended masters were at one time Manu. That's who they are. That's a whole other book series in and of itself. I'm telling you, there's a whole freaking huge, like, Netflix binge-worthy series in this. And the question is whether or not I can unpack it and put it into words. That's what I'm having to struggle with. That's part of the reason I'm coming and doing these, because I need to get it verbally out so that then I can, once I talk it through, it helps me to, sort of unpack all those files so that then I can, narrow it down and, tell the story in the best way that I can. All right, so again, Common Nephil, it looks like you're new to the channel. I'd prefer it if people avoid, running dialogue and, editorial comments and their opinion. That because it keeps me from being able to focus on the questions. So I'd prefer people, if possible, just to write down their questions. That way I won't miss their question. All right. Question, is there a difference between... Yeah, I already answered that one. Amy Meyer, question, can our bloodline relatives be reptilian? Everybody's reptilian. There is not one human being on the planet that doesn't have a reptilian brainstem. There is not one there is not one animal on the planet that doesn't have a reptilian brainstem. So your question is trying to differentiate. That's your reptilian brainstem trying to differentiate between people. That's a reptilian, that's a human. This is what I was saying. If you came on late, go back and watch from the beginning. One of the main lies of the Reptilian Agenda is to create division among the Manu, among human beings. And so the idea that some person can be good and some person can be bad, the desire to judge somebody based on one little thing, it's like the liar who is, again, to use the same analogy, there's a bunch of people at work and there's somebody stealing from the till. The guy who's stealing from the till doesn't want to get caught, so he starts blaming other people. When the evidence comes back that it's him that's stealing, he says, it's because that guy's setting me up, he's lying. So that any time that there's any credible evidence, he says, that's a lie, so-and-so's lying, they're lying. This comes from that same idea. You know, could there be people in my bloodline that are reptilian? And you know, I find it, it's so interesting. This is so telling. It's so telling that a lot of the fear of reptilians as being something other than what I'm talking about is a reptilian lie. Isn't it interesting that all the reptilians are rich and famous? That all the poor, we don't talk about poor people reptilians. We only talk about the rich and famous. You know, that once somebody becomes a powerful politician or becomes a famous musician, you know, just by that alone, they must be reptilian. Isn't it clear? Isn't it just painfully clear that this is coming from the jealousy of people who think that they're weak, and they are jealous of other people's success? And well, of course, they're reptilian. Reptilians are trying to keep us good people down, you know. And this person is living off of welfare, or you know, has a whatever. So everybody's a reptilian, including you, and you have the choice about whether or not you want to operate from your reptilian nature, or whether you want to operate from the nature of your mind. The way to operate from the nature of your mind. By the way, the phone agrees with me right there. The way to know that you're operating from your mind is if you're going after what brings you the greatest joy. Phone agrees with me. Yeah, the phone doesn't lie. Okay, go after your greatest joy, and I forgot what I was saying. That's it. That's all of this. All of the stuff I'm talking about is trying to get you to that one thing. If you can do that one thing, you don't have to worry about anything else ever again. Mad Sweeney's Beer question: are planetary natures and conjunctions viewed the same in both Western and Vedic astrology? Well, I'm not a Western astrologer, so I can't answer that question. I know that there are plenty of differences, but you're asking me, you know, I would have to be an expert in Western or be familiar with Western astrology to know that. I'm not, so I can't answer that. There are plenty of things. There are so many differences that, you know, it would take me a long time. So you'd have to ask somebody, to answer your question, you have to ask somebody who knows both. I don't, so I can't answer that. Oli Fonseca question: what do you think of the people that speak of the Great Deception? I don't know, in quotes, I don't know what the Great Deception is. So I don't know who they are, what they're talking about, so I can't have an opinion on it. Cosmo Joe question regarding the wheel. Do you mean this wheel? Or do you mean this wheel? Let's see, what was his question? According to the wheel, regarding the wheel, the duality between, so Cosmo Joe is a good friend of the channel, and he is, he's a continual object of my, yeah, the phone agrees. Cosmo Joe is a faithful viewer. He is a constant target of me making fun of his obsession with his intellect. And I'm working very hard to help him go from being an intellectually driven person to a mind-driven person. So he asks a lot of intellectual questions. Regarding, and again, duality is the intellect. The duality between the microcosm of the ego and the macrocosm of creation, in which case is the Naga a macrocosmic entity or only a representation of the egosphere? Way too much. I mean, I'm so lost in all of that. You know, why do you need to figure all that out? Is it a representation of the ego fear of the macrocosm, the micro? How does that information help you? See, that what the intellect does is it thinks if it can figure everything out, and the way it figures things out is it gets down to details. It's very, very detail-oriented, which is part of the problem, because the intellect will get so lost in the details that it gets trapped in the details. The only thing you need to know about any of this is how you're feeling. So, as wonderful as that question is, and again, I'm already confused, and I'm a pretty smart guy, but I don't even know what that means, any of that. All I know is that fear keeps you out of your soul desire. You know, the wheel, whether it be the rune wheel or the thunder wheel, is designed to help us in ritual so that we can empower ourselves. So you only need enough detail to know how to use it in ritual. Having said that, not that, you know, these kinds of questions are themselves bad questions. It's just in this case, I think you're overthinking it. And even if you're not, it's too intellectually dense for me to figure out. So I can't answer your question for you, but thank you for asking. Common Nephil question. What happens when you reach a level of self-awareness that it feels like an eternity has passed in a short amount of time? Why are you asking me that question? How would I know? What happens when you reach a level of... there's an assumption there. Are you asking me that because you've experienced that and you want me to tell you how spiritual you are? Are you asking that because you haven't experienced that and you want to experience that? The only thing that matters here is what I'm telling you, which is if you are able to distinguish between your fear-based intellect and your soul-based mind connection to your desire, follow your soul-based connection to your deepest desire. This is the focus of what we're talking about today. So you can ask whatever you want, but questions about that are the ones that I can help you. This question, I don't know it, but it sounds like you want me to tell you how spiritual you are because you've reached this state of Zen. Maybe that's not what you're saying, but I don't really have an answer to your question, and to be honest, I don't care. You know, because there are plenty of people who can get to that space and they haven't accomplished what I'm talking about. There are people that can achieve all kinds of meditational heights that haven't done what I'm talking about, which is know the difference between your soul desire and your fear-based intellect. And so everything, you know, remember, let's go back to some of the fundamentals of what we're talking about today. The earth is the nexus point of the universe. It's the most powerful place that you can be. The desire to escape this earth is a Naga fear-based drive. It is part of the agenda to keep you from achieving your highest state of awareness. Anything that doesn't have a practical effect in making your everyday life better, more fulfilled, and more happy is at best a waste of your time. And at worst, a very destructive way to divert yourself from what your real purpose is. So all of your thoughts, if you want to obsess about something, then obsess about how can I focus on my deepest soul desire, have all of my emotions, be an emotional being, and take action only on what I know is going to bring me the greatest happiness. Anything else that goes on in your life is a waste of time. I'm not saying don't have fun. Like I said, I just went body surfing. For me, that's fun. It's part of my soul desire, but it's also a fun way to distract myself. Let's talk about sex. Sex is a lot of fun too. Ideally, sex is to bond you emotionally and spiritually to somebody who will bring you love and support, and you find a greater fulfillment in yourself when you are connected to other people. So sex is a really fun way to do that. It can also be used as a distraction, to distract you from your feelings. Right? Anything that doesn't have a practical effect in keeping you in the here and now is at best a waste of time. Again, I'm trying to get past all of the people talking and leaving their opinions. Please avoid that if possible. Mad Sweeney's Bar. Let me see. Did I miss any questions here? Mad Sweeney's Bar. Beer. Mad Sweeney's Beer. Question. Can you say the Om Namah Shivaya a couple of times so I can hear how it's pronounced? Om. I'll spell it for you. That M is actually an NG sound. Om Namah Shivaya. Oops. Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. There you go. Cosmo Joe, question. The wheel seems to be divided. Okay, so first he's going to lay down the assumption, then he's going to ask a question. The wheel seems to be divided between external and internal qualities like intuition and ascended masters, northeast to northwest, or the lower self's creation and the unknown, southeast, southwest. Is the Naga the outside or the inside? The Naga is, if you have to place the Naga, it would be in the southwest. Because as somebody said earlier in the beginning, is it appropriate to use the Nagas in this way? Because some of the Nagas are beneficial. So there are entities and beings in the southwest that are very beneficial to our awareness. But the southwest is our unconscious mind. That's where all of our fears and incorrect assumptions and everything else is. So this is symbolized by the serpent Rahu. Loki. This is why Loki has such a connection to serpents. You know, that he's bound up under the earth and a serpent is tied up there and there's venom dripping on. There's a reason why there's that connection. All right, so Sean, question, what is the best way to deal with a bully? God, that's a really great question. I would need to know the specifics. Best way to deal with a bully is to avoid them. I last night was up really late, and like 1:30 at night I went walking on the beach, and I'm kind of new to this area, and I hear, as I get to the strand, I hear somebody whistle at me like, I can't whistle very well, woo-hoo! You know, like they're whistling at a stripper or something, and I'm a 200-pound bald 55-year-old guy. That's not the normal thing that somebody does. And I thought to myself that whoever that is better stay the fuck away from me, because it's at nighttime and you just just offended me on a pretty deep level. So I went walking on the beach, and then I'm turning around to see the guy, and I see him come out from behind. He's on somebody's porch. He's not, and he's covered in this thing, and he comes after me, walking after me. And so my first instinct was to turn and go after the guy and, you know, tell him to leave me the fuck alone or I'm going to crack your fucking head open. But the smart part of me says, you know, first off, you have no idea what's going on with that guy. You don't know if he's high. You don't know if he's got weapons. He's got nothing to lose. He's obviously homeless, you know. So I did the smart thing, and I bolted out of there. And the guy was like, hey, do you have a light? And I'm like, I just pretended he wasn't there. So, you know, sometimes the best way to deal with a bully is just to walk the other way. But I'd have to know more of what we're talking about. You know, there's a real trend on YouTube I've seen, how to put a narcissist in their place. You know, and if you say this to a narcissist, that'll really put them in their place. And my thought is, well, what are you doing with a narcissist to begin with? If you know that they're a narcissist, why are you with them? You know, unless they're your father or your mother and you can't leave them, the only excuse is that you want to be in that kind of chaos. So, if you're asking me what's the best way to deal with a bully, my first question is, well, why are you even in any connection to them? Just get the hell away from them. Second thing to do is to do what I've said before, which is the main thing, and this is like, if in doubt, do this. Do this one thing, and this will solve all of your problems. That one thing is to ask yourself in the moment, what is it that gives me the greatest joy? And then go do that thing. Whether that's to go surfing and get out of that bully's face, or to pack up and move because you want to move to the other side of the country and become a musician. Whatever the hell it is, that's the answer to pretty much any question that you have. So it works for bullies as well. But having said that, I would need to know more information and talk to you to find out what's going on before to give you a really good answer. Cosmo Joe question. So the Naga is an entity piercing into the... No. You're overthinking it. Stop trying to figure it out so much. You are the Naga. You are the Manu and you are the Naga. It's all within you. You don't need any more Naga than what's right here in your noggin. The Naga is living in your noggin. Don't think it. Don't think it's. Don't. You're overthinking. Sean, in a school setting, a school bully that picks on other people. I don't know. I had to deal with it as a kid. I got picked on a lot. I got picked on by my older brother. I got picked on by older kids, and that turned me into a very frightening person in my 20s because I had been picked on so much that, and even now when I go surfing, my first instinct is just like last night. Somebody starts coming at me and I don't know what's going on. My first instinct is to turn around and be ready to pummel. If I'm out surfing, somebody paddles out, my first instinct is, what are you doing out here? And they're usually just wanting to have fun, and I have to learn to get over that. Not everybody's a bully. So I don't know. I wish I could give you a good, when it comes down to this, what you can do is what I just said earlier. Do it in your meditation, focus on your power, focus on what gives you strength, focus on what gives you joy, and go after that. And that will usually create a protective barrier around you, so that if you're following your soul desire, the universe has to protect you. So even if that person, that bully doesn't get put in his place, the universe will sort of keep you out of harm's way. That's my experience. All right, so I'm going to take a short break here. I'm going to do a little bit of some business here, which is a little bit of letting you know about a new service here, and then I'll come back and see if we have any more questions. So, hang on. Whoops. Wrong one. This is the one I want to do. I think this is it. Never mind. I did not upload it, so we'll have to talk about it another time. In any case, we'll go back to this one. I'll be back in a couple minutes. Alrighty, so I'm back. Alright, let's see if there are any questions. Ginunga Greg says, question: how long should I wait to do Qigong after eating? I guess the same amount of time that you would wait to go swimming. I mean, Qigong isn't that big of a deal. It's not like you're going to go run a marathon. So I would just follow your instincts. To be honest, I've never asked that. Nobody's ever asked me that question. I don't think it's a big deal. Okay, so I don't see any questions, so let's see if I can narrow down some more of what I want to say here today. Before I do that, there is a new service that I have just launched, which is the 9 World Rune Certification teaching. So you can go to runecertification.thunderwizard.com. I don't even know how many. I'm still adding more videos all the time, but every single video I have, whether it's paid, like paid DVD, or whether it's on the Patreon site or free on the free YouTube channel, has been put into one place. I'm adding new video teachings that go a little deeper into rune readings and rune divination. And that's for those who want to be certified to do the 9 World Rune reading that I do. It's one of my most popular services. And people have been asking me, can you certify us in rune? Can you say blah, blah, blah. So the way it'll work is you can either just go and, study all of the videos that are there just for your own edification. And then for those that want to get certified, they can get certified as well. And if you're certified, it means that you get to use my name and you get to say that you studied, as a Thunder Wizard rune reader. And I will put a page for you on my website, and so that whenever I, point to this here, whenever I do what I'm about to do right now, whenever I do this and I go here to runereadings.thunderwizard.com, people will see your bright smiling face, and they'll be able to purchase a reading from you, and it will be in their financial interest to do so, because I will charge more to have to do a reading myself, whereas if they get one from you, they're going to pay significantly less. And you get to keep the money, except for a small little donation comes back to me for allowing me to, for the service I provide to allow you that and to say that you're certified. So that is something new, and people have been asking it, and I'm almost done with that. You can get started with it now if you want. I still have a few more videos to put on there, but people can go ahead and get started now if they want. Okay, so let's talk about the Nagas and the Manu. So I'm going to recap about what I said last time, which is that when the Manu created human beings, we are the descendant of the Manu. Manu means mind. And in multiple traditions, you find that the first human beings are called Manu. In the Germanic tradition, I believe that they are the first human being is called Manuj. In the Vedic, I believe it is Manu. And that there are multiple Manus, which are like the predecessors of the human race. So I don't know which Manu we're in. But Manu means mind. So this is why I'm pointing out the difference between the mind and the intellect, and the dangers of allowing the intellect to completely take over the mind. And again, the intellect is that part of you that wants to figure everything out. The part of you that says this is good, that is bad, that is up, that is down. Part of you that is full of fear. This is your intellect. The intellect is only here to solve minor problems and how to deal with the three-dimensional universe. It's not designed to go beyond that. The mind is who we are as human beings, which means that according to many of our ancestors, the whole focus of being a human being is to reflect the soul, because Manu means mind and it means moon. It's the same word. It means to reflect the sun or the soul, the Sawol. Sawol is the Anglo-Saxon word for the sun. No, don't tell me what I'm spelling. I know what I'm spelling. Sawol equals sun. Sawol is the ancient spelling of S-O-U-L, soul. So the mind is there to reflect the soul. That is what meditation is. When you're in a state of meditation, then what is happening is that you are reflecting the soul. Zephyron Digital, looks like you're new to the channel. Thank you very much. Please try to restrict any comments. If you have a question, I'd love to hear it, but I'd prefer we didn't just type whatever the hell. I know what I'm saying. I don't need you to agree. Thank you. Nothing personal. So, yeah, type question and then ask a question, and I'll be able to help you. So what happened is that the Manu, when they created human beings, they had to make hybrids. So this is, again, a deeper subject we have to get into, as how the human beings became this hybrid of the reptilian intellect and the mind, the spiritual mind. This is something, as I said, it's going to take a while to share, but this is why we're constantly at war with ourselves. This is why we are constantly going from, trying to get out of fear and going into trust. This is why this is happening. Because one of the things that the reptilian brain does is it gives us a very strong connection to the physical realm. And for the soul to really learn, it has to be confined. It has to be confined in three-dimensional space. And so for the soul to use the intellect to interface in three-dimensional space is not normal for it, which is why it takes babies so long to figure out what the hell's going on. Because babies, you see them looking around, they really can't see a hell of a lot. Their brain and their eyes haven't figured out how to put all this light together and figure out what that is, and what is that blob, and what is this. That's like for the soul. Soul is the same way. It needs the confines of the three-dimensional world, and it needs the confines of the intellect to help it interface. And so part of the learning process is for the soul to learn how to interface in this three-dimensional world and still hold on to its prime directive, which is to go after what its soul desire is. So the way that I described it last time is that the Manu did not want their children to make the same mistake they had made. The Manu became so powerful with their powers of the mind that they began to abuse that power. And they found that the only thing that kept the mind from getting so powerful that it can abuse its power is if it was only focused on the soul. Only focused on going after what the soul wants. And so this became embedded in the human experience. So that if you follow what your soul is telling you to do and you allow your mind to reflect the soul, that then you gain in spiritual power. If you continue to do that, you will gain so much power that you will be able to intend your reality. But what's built in that is if you go against that, if you go against your soul desire and live in your fears, operate from your fears, then what ends up happening is that the opposite happens. You have this experience that everything is against you, that you are limited, that you are a victim, and your fear, just like a boa constrictor, just keeps squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, and the more fear you have, the tighter the grip gets. And so it was built into the whole human dynamic that what you had to do was learn to continuously take action on only your soul and the joy that comes from your soul, which I call the soul desire. If you're new to the channel, you want to understand what I'm talking about, you can get this book, The Shamanic Secret Commandment to a Perfect Life. You can find that at michaelwilliamdenny.com. Okay, very good. All right. Let's see if there are any more questions. I'm kind of running out of steam, so if you want me to stay on, I need to see some good questions. John Burnham, question. Do you think the reptilian brainstem was stimulated more by the myths of vampires? What do you mean more? I don't know what you mean. The myths of vampires and werewolves are, those mythologies, in my opinion, are just simply talking about human beings that are doing exactly what I'm saying. When you go away from your own soul desire and you operate from your fears, which are your appetites of I need more money, I need more food, I need more power, I need more wealth, whatever it is, that when you operate from that, you become an insatiable monster, that nothing will ever fill that hole within you. So the fear of zombies, the fear of vampires, the fear of werewolves was actually an unconscious teaching method for people to keep them on following their soul desire. It was also a fear that we have within us, which is why we're afraid of dead bodies. Like, dead bodies walking around really are not that big of a deal. Why are zombies so focused on brains? They want to eat brains because brains represent to us the identity. And we're afraid of getting consumed with our greed and our baser instincts that will run completely rampant out of control, and we'll lose our sense of self, which is our mind, our soul. We're afraid of losing connection to our soul. And so we are afraid of these kinds of monsters. So in my opinion, that's all that they are. I don't think that those myths, that the reptilian brainstem was stimulated by them. I think that it just reflects the fear that we have, the knowledge that we have this in us. That we have these monsters within us, and if we continue to feed them, that they will take control. This is what Fenris is. Fenris the wolf is the same idea. This is why Tyr is the one that, the only one of the gods that is able to distract Fenris enough so that they can bind him with the magic rope of subtlety. Again, if just like the snake squeezes and squeezes and squeezes, and it's waiting for you to exhale and relax so it can squeeze. And you fight, and then you have to take a break, and then it squeezes. And this is that rope of subtlety, because if you try and keep Fenris, which is your lower instincts, your instincts for there's never enough food or sex or power or control, that if you try and keep that bound up with strength, like rope or chains or locks, he just breaks through it like it doesn't exist. But what keeps him bound up is subtlety, the sound of a cat's footfall, the lips of a chicken, or something like that. I forget which one things that don't exist. The subtlety, you have to treat this with subtlety. If you try, like religion does, to force down your throat morality, then what ends up happening, who are the people, by the way, in case you didn't know this, in DC, right, the political organizations that get together when they're having their gatherings or whatever, the ones that use the most prostitutes are Republicans. The right-wing fundamentalist born-again Christians, those are the ones that get the prostitutes. The majority of them. I'm not saying that Democrats don't. But what the point is that it's that Christian mindset of you can't ever have sex. Sex is wrong. It builds up such a resistance that you go crazy. Same thing with anything. It doesn't matter what it is. So you need to have a subtle touch, which means you allow yourself to have all your feelings, you allow yourself to have all of your desires, all of your instincts, and you don't try and control it to that degree. Because then if you do, then what happens is it has to break out. I think that's what these myths are about when it comes to vampires and werewolves. Also referring to the spiritual avatars in the Bible, what are you talking about? I'm going back to John Burnham question. What spiritual avatars are in the Bible? The Bible doesn't believe in avatars. They believe in Jesus. That would be the closest thing to an avatar, but the Bible doesn't believe in that. I don't know why you're bringing that up. I think that's a modern New Age. Here's the thing about the Bible. This is why I'll tell you why I have such a strong dislike of the Bible and the Abrahamic tradition. There are so many Christians out there of varying degrees. I mean, you have fundamentalist, right-wing, born-again, hardcore conservative Christians, and then you have everything in between. And I remember reading a book a long time ago called The Gospel According to Jesus. And what it was a bunch of religious scholars, liberal religious scholars, who were writing, they were examining the Gospels, and they were picking out the parts that they thought, I think this is what Jesus really said. I don't think Jesus said that. I think Jesus said this. And what they were doing is they were taking the parts that sounded good, like love and grace, but anything that had to do with sin or condemnation they were taking out because they didn't like that. And as if they assuming that a man named Jesus, who these things are written about, existed, assuming that you have the ability, because you're a scholar, to decide what he did and didn't say based on what you like and what you don't like. I mean, that's just so incredibly narcissistic, But this is where I would say most religious people have to live. Because at some point, you're going to find something in that book you don't like. Whether it's trying to explain why, the Joshua came in and wiped out all the men, women, children, and animals. And you have to know that some of them were innocent. Right? Of course, that never happened. But you have to decide which part of it you like and what you don't like. It's impossible to do that. To believe that God hates your guts so much that he wants to put you in eternal torment for eternity. to get rid of that, but say, I love the part where Jesus says that you're forgiven of your sins and that, you know, the Son of Man came to forgive. I love that, so I'm going to hold on to that. The problem with that is that you can't take any of it, even the parts that you like, without adopting the assumptions that you don't like. Because in order for there to be forgiveness of sins, it means that you're sinful. In order for Jesus to die to give you grace, you have to accept that God the Father can't stand you. The God that created you can't stand the sight of you. You can't have one without the other. So this is why when people ask me about, well, did the Bible really mean this? And wasn't it just a symbol of this or a metaphor of that? No, it wasn't. Even the Gnostic origins of the Bible are based on human beings being trapped and being victims. And that you have to go past the demiurge to get to the true God. That there's still this victim mentality, which of course is really just the reflection of that time in history where you had people being enslaved by imperial elites. And it was their spiritual projection of their, real life here on earth. And the whole point of that religion was to say, this world is fucked up. Let's just focus on getting past and get to the true. That's what all that shit's about. Which is why our ancestors, the myths of our ancestors don't reflect that. Shamanism is about learning how to live in the world. The first shamans, according to many native traditions, are people who had the ability to tap into where the herds of animals were going. And they would go into trance so they could see where the herds of animals were, so they could follow them, so they could survive, so they could eat. Then later on it became they started doing rituals to take care of the souls of the animals that they had killed. Shamanism was a practical spiritual path. Before that, there was no religion. Human beings were still evolving until they had a need to have something that would connect them spiritually so that they could function better in the here and now, in this three-dimensional world. Any religion that doesn't make you happier and help you have a better life here and now is a waste of time at best and outright destruction at worst. So that's why when people want to ask me about the Bible, that's why I say throw it away. There's nothing valuable, because even if I start picking apart, oh, Jesus meant this, and then this is what the symbolism of what Jesus said, and we can take that, then I'm giving credence to the rest of the assumptions underneath it that you have to accept in order to accept any of the good parts of Christianity. Okay, let's see here. Tamu and Gina says, nice backdrop. Thank you, Tamu. By the way, thank you for your email. I know I didn't email you back, but I did read it and I did appreciate it. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to our interview later on. By the way, I just did an interview with Black Earth Productions, so you can go to his channel, Black Earth Productions. I believe he's uploaded it now. I'm going to upload my version of it later after I've sifted, because we talked for like 4 hours. It was really intense. So anyway, you can go and watch that on his channel if you want. Paige Keller question. I'm just catching the end of this, but who created this matrix and who put us here and why? You created the matrix and you put yourself here so that you would learn to follow your greatest joy and learn not to follow your greatest fears. In a nutshell. Zephyrin Digital question, how do we stop them? Who are them? I don't know what you mean by them. If you're going to ask a question, please, ask a question. Make sure that you write it out and that it makes sense and that it's legible and that you've thought it through. I don't know who they are, but first off, depending on who we're talking about, there's an assumption that you are a victim, because you wouldn't need to stop them unless you think they have the ability to harm you. So you have to understand that nothing can harm you unless you allow it. And if you are being harmed, it's because you are wanting to be diverted from your true power, because you are afraid of your power. And the only way to enjoy your true power is to surrender. And that is frightening, because we're afraid of death. Listen, I don't say any of this lightly. I have to tell you, I don't say any of this lightly. I've been a spiritual teacher for decades, and I've been a spiritual seeker my whole life. And I have never had any fear of death or the afterlife. I've had no doubts about it. I've had all kinds of experiences and dreams and visions and blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until my soulmate passed away 9 months ago. This would have been, by the way, this has been a tough weekend for me. This would have been our anniversary. So it's been kind of a sad weekend for me. Not kind of. It's been a very sad weekend for me. But I never feared death until I got so intimately connected to another soul, to such a degree that everything that I do in this life is something that I want to share with her. Everything I do. Everything I say, everything I experience, I want to talk to her about it. I want her to be a part of it with me. Everything I still do, I mean, I picked this place out because she would like it here. And, we both like the same things and all that. I mean, and this is happening on an unconscious level. I can't control it. But not being able to have that communication with her, and not being able to know what is my own imagination, because I mean, I wanted so bad to communicate with her. And there were a handful of people who came to me who believed that they had messages from her. And it was extremely tempting to buy into those messages. And what ended up happening is that when I used my mind instead of my intellect or my need or my fear, and I sat back and listened, there was nothing that was told to me that couldn't be found out either on the internet or by listening to what I say, and that a lot of the things were just so completely wrong. That these people wanting to, they were projecting onto me, what their lower self-understandings of what they think probably would have been said, or sometimes people would tell me something, oh, she's saying this, and it was like there's no way in the world she ever would have said that to me under any circumstances. So I know this is your stuff. I didn't say that because they haven't asked. Nobody's asked me what do you think. But point is that it's been so difficult for me to try and figure out, what is my, because no matter what, whether I have a dream, whether I have a vision, whether she appears in front of me, I could easily explain all of that away. None of it proves anything. None of it proves that the soul exists or that she's out there. So I say this with as much awareness as anybody, that I have been experiencing the fear of death like I never have in my whole life. And it's ironic, I could care less about me. I mean, I'd happily end my existence if it meant her happiness. I would. I love her that much. But the fear of if she's not out there, that means I'm going to die too. That fear is just hitting me now for the first time in my life. I've never had it before. So when I talk to you about overcoming and facing your fears, I'm not talking about the new age, pretend everything is love and light and pretend it's not there. I'm not telling you to do that. And I'm also not telling you to do anything that doesn't benefit you in the here and now. And I can tell you from personal experience and from watching others and teaching others that having all of your fears and taking action, sometimes in direct opposition to what your fears are telling you to do, is in fact the most practically beneficial thing you can do in your life for your own empowerment and for everybody else's empowerment. So if your spirituality doesn't have a practical, payoff, then at best it's worthless. This is why, I come down on people who think that shamanism is about taking hallucinogens and tripping out. In my experience, Most of the time when people are tripping out, it weakens their ability to follow through on their action, to take action in their lives. That's why I don't do it. Qigong, on the other hand, is a natural way to have those same experiences, to stimulate all of the glands in the brain, so that you have the same kinds of experiences you do on teacher plants, power plants, hallucinogens. There's no side effects, and it gives you more strength to take action in your life. That's why I teach it. One of the benefits is that it gives you a greater spiritual awareness. It gives you a greater spiritual experience of having connected to the eternal power of the universe, the power of the mind, all of that. That's a side effect. But that is meaningless if it doesn't equate into real life, practical solutions for your everyday life. If it doesn't make you physically healthier, doesn't make you psychologically and emotionally happier, if it doesn't give you greater wealth and prosperity, whatever that means to you, it doesn't have to mean money. If it doesn't give you better relationships with other people, it's pointless. So when I tell you this big, long mythology that I said is, has multiple volumes of books worth of stuff, I'm going to take you on a huge trip if you follow me on it. I'm going to take you down a spiritual pathway that if you listen to the mythology as I teach it to you and you let it sink into your mind, it will change your assumptions and help you to have what is most important, which is to have a better life here and now. That's the whole point of all of this. This is what I'm here to do. This is my job. Some people are meant to be mayor or who knows what. My job, is to do this. That's why I do it. All right, let's see if there are any more questions. I'm starting to just babble. Yeah, so let's see. Again, guys, please try to avoid putting your opinions on here, please. Takes up a lot of my time trying to get past to the questions. Isis Blackfeather, question: do you see a future where we as humankind stop segregation between peoples? Do I see that future? Yeah, I see that future. It's going to, look, we've been here on this planet we're just talking about human beings and proto-human beings for millions of years. If my understanding is correct, we have been black-skinned, dark-skinned, dark-eyed people up until, if at the latest it would be, probably 20,000 years. Because assuming that understanding is that the first human beings, when they got to northern Europe, got caught in the ice ages and were in ice ages for 40,000 years. And so for those 40,000 years, in order to get vitamin D, I just watched a movie about surfers in Iceland. And in Iceland in the wintertime, it's cold, it's overcast, and the sun comes out for like 4 hours a day. And that's what it was like for our European ancestors. The sun barely came out, and it was, so in order to survive, you had to lose your skin pigmentation or you wouldn't get any vitamin D. Without vitamin D, your immune system goes, pew. It's the only reason. Now, that's one. The other one, there's a later one, which I don't think is right. It doesn't make sense, but let's assume it's true. There's another theory that says that Europeans lost their pigment 7,000 years ago as a result of eating grains, because a heavy grain diet has low vitamin D, and so I don't think that doesn't make sense to me. But even if that's true, then we've only been light skinned for 7,000 years. But whether it's 40,000 years or 7,000 years, it's a second in the time clock of human beings. It's almost nothing. So there wasn't any such thing as segregation based on race. 100,000 years ago, because there wasn't any such thing. So do I think, yeah, eventually, again, if you took the blondest, blue-eyed people, as long as you had like a viable group, as long as there was enough people to create enough genetic variation that they would survive. If you took them and put them on a tropical island without any technology to build big buildings with air conditioning, and they had to live out in under the sun all day, and if you came back in 10 or 20,000 years, they would all be dark skinned, because the only people that survived would be the ones that had dark skin. So the point is that we have no idea what's going to happen. We're in this phase of humanity where we seem to be running the show, but all it would take is one good, meteor shower, one good solar flare, one good ice age to disrupt all of that, and then people are going to need to survive. Again, you take the most racist guy and you put him on an island, and he doesn't have any technology, and he has to survive. If he wants to have kids, he's going to marry the dark-skinned woman so that his kids will have dark skin, because the sun, I can't go out in the sun. I mean, I have to wait until like sunset to go out without any sunscreen on if I'm going to be out for more than half an hour. And the other day, the sun is, summertime. I went out, and I'm thinking, oh, I'll be out for a half an hour, and I went swimming, and I came back, and I got sunburned, and I got a tan on me. I can tell you from personal experience that in order to function, you're better off with dark skin, unless you live in Iceland. So nature's going to win out, and all this bullshit is going to get rid of itself. So do I see a future where we as humankind stop segregating? Eventually, nature will force it to happen. Whether it happens in my lifetime or not, I don't know. John Burnham, question. So are you saying you can't link Native American / Egyptian mythology and the serpent? What do you mean? When did I say I couldn't do that? I don't understand your question. And those are two completely different cultures, by the way. I mean, why, can we link them? They both use the serpent. Yeah, so what's your point? Are you saying that they're descended from each other? I don't understand what you're asking. And I don't even know why you're asking it, because I don't remember ever saying that you couldn't do that. Looking into okay, so then, yeah, he's going to ask a question. So you're not asking me a question because you want my opinion. You're asking a question so that you can either argue with me or get me to co-sign your belief. Your belief now, after your question, you say, looking into them, you can see how they are all connected. It's why it's the mythology of the circle of life. Okay, what's your point? What is it you want to say from that? That they're all descended from each other? That they're all, this is the thing, when people make superficial connections because they're looking for, what I hear in that is that you have a very respectable emotional agenda to see that all people are connected, just like the other question that I just answered, which obviously I agree with. I mean, we're all descended from, you go back far enough, there's two human beings, I don't know, 100 or 200,000 years ago that we're all descended from. So, we're all the same family. But when we're looking at things like mythology and we're looking at languages, there's a huge difference between the Semitic language and the Indo-European. There's a huge difference between Asian languages and other languages. So when people want to make superficial connections because of their emotional agenda to see everybody as one, then that does a disservice, because then that watering of things down prevents us from finding out what that specific language wants to keep and share. For instance, to understand the difference between Indra and Thunar. They come from the same word. Thunar means moon Lord. And please don't change my spelling. I know exactly what I'm doing. Thunar means moon lord. Indra means in Thura, bright, moon, king. It's the same word, Indra and Thunar, Thor. And that's why they're both the lightning god. There's slight variations that I could get into, but they come from the same word. That can only be understood if you understand it in the terms of Indo-European language. So what a lot of people are doing now, which is just so infuriating, people will contact me or put things on here and say, I talked to so-and-so and he's a linguist and he says that elite comes from this, and they'll find something in a Semitic language and then they'll find something in Indo-European, and because they have the same sound, they'll pick one prefix from one and a suffix from another and throw it together and say that's, and it'll be a French word. And they'll say, see, that comes from the Bible, and it just shows a complete lack of understanding of how languages work. So I'm saying you've got to be smart about that, because if you're not, you'll miss what's in there and what's important. So for you to accuse me here of not wanting to link Native American to Egyptian mythology, and again, I don't remember ever saying that, but what you're saying is that you don't like something I said because you want to have this general thing where you want to throw everything together and say, see, they're all talking about snakes, so it comes from the same whatever, Atlantis or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with what's underneath it, which is you have an emotional agenda to see us all being one family. That is different than trying to then find that, artificially find that, by throwing different traditions together in ways without understanding what the differences are. And yeah, we can say, yes, that there's this understanding about the serpent and the serpent this and the serpent that and all that. But again, John, you didn't ask me that question because you wanted my opinion. You asked me that question because you wanted to argue with me and tell me how you were right and I was wrong. And that's not really a question, is it? Okay. Yeah, so yeah, John wants to keep going on about the Hopi myth symbolism. You're obviously not, you're new to my channel. I've spoken about the Hopi myth in great depth. You have an emotional agenda to see me as, I don't know, you think that I'm antagonistic to your viewpoint, so you've decided that you're going to argue with me. So I'm not going to buy into it. But you need to spend more time on my channel to know what it is that I really teach, so that you have an understanding of what it is that I'm really saying. And I'm willing to bet that if you get away your personal agenda of wanting to compete with me about what this means and what that means, or whatever you think I'm threatening your belief system, and put it aside and actually study what I'm teaching, your belief is actually going to be expounded even more fully. What it is that you want to know and want to understand about the unity of the human race is going to be enriched if you actually put your intellect down and listen to what I'm saying. Okay. Rami Ella, question. Is Reiki just another deception? No. New to the channel, Reiki is not just another deception. Don't practice it, but I have a lot of friends who do, and it seems something not good. Nagas and Reiki. Yeah, so again, Nagas are you. Maybe you didn't listen to the beginning when the whole story that I've been talking. You are the Nagas, and you are the Manu. You are the hybrid. Everybody on the planet is both Naga and Manu. Get rid of the fear. Watch more of my channel. Please get rid of the fear. Thank you for the question. But no, there's nothing evil about Reiki. Okay. Let's see here. Again, looking for the questions. Please try to avoid giving me your opinions. I know you're very smart and you have so many things to say, but it gets in my way of being able to find the questions. Okay, I don't see any more questions here. I'm going to take a break. probably come back and wrap it up for today because I've been on for a while. So be right back. Okay, so I'm back. Can't think of anything that I need to say at the moment. All right, so that's it. I think we're done for the day. All right, so let me do a little bit of business before I change anything. So if anybody here is new to the channel and you want to have power, if what you want is to overcome the Naga agenda, the Reptilian Agenda, one of the most powerful tools I have available for you is right up here, qigong.thunderwizard.com. Go there and you can learn a series of techniques and meditations that will empower you to be able to overcome energetically any attacks on you, whether they be, disease, whether they be mental, spiritual. It's the most powerful energy practice that I know of. The whole point, the answer to everybody's question, I mean, if I maybe, make a blanket statement, the answer to everybody's question is if you listen to your soul and you follow what gives you the greatest joy and you take action on it, you will be bulletproof. You won't be spared fear because taking risks, following your soul is risky in all kinds of ways. And you may go through a lot of fear and you may have a lot of emotional baggage that you're going to have to work through. That's keeping you from experiencing your greatest joy. That is the way to overcome the reptilian brainstem. It's the only way to do it. Let's see. What else I wanted to share with you, again, I've already said it, but you can go to Rune Certification, certification.thunderwizard.com if you want to learn everything I teach about runes in one place. I think there's more coming, but I think there's 17 videos on one website, and most of those videos are anywhere from an hour to 3 hours long. So you can also become certified and do what I do a Thunder Wizard rune readings. If you're unfamiliar with what those readings are, you can go to here, runereadings.thunderwizard.com, and there's a video there that will explain to you what those are and how they work. In my experience, the 9-world rune readings are an extremely effective way of looking at all of the 9 aspects of the human psyche. And so you can find out, how you can balance your internal universe in order to be able to, work through certain things. And anyway, it's a really great tool to help people. There's a term in shamanism called soul retrieval. And looking at the 9 worlds, we have 9 minds. And so in my experience, soul retrieval means that we've either retreated into one of our minds, or that one of our minds is really lacking and out of balance. And by bringing the cohesiveness of all of the 9 minds together to work cooperatively, that in itself will bring about a soul retrieval. So it is, in fact, a way to give soul retrieval if you want to do it. You can learn how to do it for yourself. You can master it and create your own. You don't have to connect to me. You can take what I give you and go start your own, rune reading service. If you want to be connected to me and to the Thunder Wizard name, then you can get certified, and then I'll put a page onto my website with your video, and people can buy directly from you. And every time I point to, go to runereadings.thunderwizard.com, they'll see your beautiful, bright, shining face there, and they can get a reading from you and save themselves some money, because I charge more than you will. All right, so that's all for the business aspect for me. I'll check and see if there are any last-minute questions. I don't see any questions here, so I am going to bid you all adieu, my friends. Thank you very much for the privilege of being here to speak to you. And thank you for letting me rant and rave as I am wont to do, And I look forward to greater interactions with you, and we shall see what we shall see. So that is all from me right now. Talk to you later.